The Mediterranean trembled at the mention of his name. Kings feared him, merchants cursed him, sailors whispered stories of red-bearded ships rising from the horizon like a storm. But who was Hayreddin Barbarossa, the man Europe called a pirate and an empire called a hero? He did not begin as an admiral. He began as the son of a humble potter on a small island in the Aegean Sea. No one expected that this boy would one day command fleets, defeat powerful kingdoms, and redraw the balance of power across the Mediterranean. But that's not the most shocking part. Barbarossa would rise from outlaw to Grand Admiral of one of the most powerful empires in history. He would face the combined navies of Europe and live to tell the tale. And in the end, he would leave behind a legacy so powerful that even his enemies were forced to respect him. This is the story of the man who turned the sea itself into his empire. Before he became a legend, Hayreddin was known as Hayzer, one of 4 brothers growing up on the island of Lesbos. The island sat between worlds, where east met west, and trade ships filled the horizon. It was a place of opportunity, but also danger. From a young age, Hayzer understood that the sea could make a man rich or swallow him whole. His father was a potter, steady and hard-working, but the sea called louder than clay and kiln. Alongside his brothers, Hayzer became a sailor and later a privateer, targeting ships that crossed contested waters. At first, they were small-time raiders, but ambition burned bright, and the Mediterranean was full of rival kingdoms locked in endless struggle. The early 16th century was a battlefield of empires. Spain was expanding aggressively after its victories in Iberia. Powerful European fleets sought to dominate trade routes and coastal cities in North Africa. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire was rising in strength, looking westward towards the same waters. The sea was not peaceful. It was a chessboard of war. Hayzer and his elder brother Arouj seized the moment. They captured ships, rescued refugees fleeing conquest, and built alliances along the North African coast. To some, they were pirates. To others, they were protectors. But when Arouj fell in battle against Spanish forces, everything changed. Hayzer inherited more than command. He inherited a war. It was then that he gained the name Barbarossa, meaning red beard, a name that would soon echo across ports and palaces alike. Yet his greatest move was still ahead. In a bold decision, he aligned himself with the Ottoman Sultan, transforming from sea raider to imperial commander. And with that alliance, the Mediterranean would never be the same. With Ottoman backing, Barbarossa was no longer a rogue commander. He was now the Sultan's admiral, armed with resources, ships, and authority. But that did not make his path easier. It made him a direct target of Europe's most powerful rulers. The Mediterranean erupted into open conflict. Spanish fleets hunted him relentlessly, determined to crush his growing influence. Coastal cities shifted loyalty out of fear or survival. Yet Barbarossa moved quickly, striking where defenses were weak and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. He fortified Algiers and turned it into a stronghold. Cannons lined the harbor. Shipyards worked night and day. Sailors from across the region joined his ranks, drawn by wealth, revenge, or loyalty. His fleet grew stronger with every campaign. But the real test came when Europe united against him. In 1538, a massive Holy League fleet led by Admiral Andrea Doria sailed to confront him. Their ships outnumbered his. Their cannons were heavier. On paper, Barbarossa should have lost. Yet at the Battle of Preveza, he did the unexpected. He used the coastline to his advantage. He maneuvered with speed and precision, forcing the larger fleet into confusion. Cannon smoke filled the air, oars crashed against waves, and signals were lost in chaos. Against all odds, Barbarossa crushed the coalition. The victory stunned Europe. The Mediterranean tilted towards Ottoman dominance, but that was not the worst for his enemies. Barbarossa's triumph gave the empire control of key sea routes for decades. Trade shifted, alliances shifted, power shifted. Still, constant warfare came at a cost. Storms wrecked ships, supply lines stretched thin, and rival commanders whispered in palace halls. Barbarossa had conquered the sea, but could he maintain control in a world where loyalty changed as fast as the tide? Victory at Preveza should have secured Hayreddin's legend forever. The Mediterranean now trembled at his name. But power at sea is never permanent, and new storms were already forming beyond the horizon. Europe refused to accept defeat. Emperor Charles V prepared a massive counterattack, determined to break Ottoman dominance. In 1541, he launched a grand expedition against Algiers. Thousands of soldiers and dozens of ships advanced toward Barbarossa's stronghold. But nature intervened in a way no one expected. A violent storm smashed into the invading fleet. Ships were driven onto rocks, cannons sank beneath the waves. Chaos replaced confidence in a single night. The great emperor's campaign collapsed before Barbarossa even had to strike. Yet even as enemies failed, tension brewed within the empire. Court politics in Istanbul were never simple. Rivals envied Barbarossa's fame and questioned his loyalty. Some feared he had grown too powerful. After all, a man who controls the sea controls trade, wealth, and influence. Barbarossa was summoned back to the capital, not as a prisoner, but as a figure too large to ignore. He was received with honor, yet the atmosphere was cautious. Would he remain a loyal servant or become a threat to the throne? The question lingered in every silent glance. In a surprising move, Barbarossa chose stability over ambition. He retired from active campaigns and focused on strengthening naval systems. He trained new commanders. He reorganized fleets. No one expected this restraint from a man known for bold raids and fearless battles. But beneath the calm, another mystery remained. Had Barbarossa truly stepped back, or was this his final strategic move? His name echoed across ports from Venice to Tunis. Even in retirement, he shaped the future of naval warfare, and the legend of the red-bearded admiral only grew stronger with time. Barbarossa did not die in battle. He did not fall beneath enemy swords. Instead, he spent his final years in Istanbul, watching the empire he helped build stretch across the seas. It was a quiet ending for a man who had once lived in constant war. But his influence did not fade with his retirement. The Ottoman navy remained dominant for decades after Preveza. Trade routes shifted. European powers were forced to rethink their strategies. The balance of power in the Mediterranean had permanently changed. His tactics became doctrine. Coordinated fleet formations, aggressive coastal assaults, and mastery of artillery at sea reshaped naval warfare. Admirals studied his campaigns carefully. Even his enemies learned from him. In many ways, he modernized the concept of maritime empire. Yet history remains divided about him. To some, he was a pirate who thrived on chaos. To others, he was a brilliant strategist who rose from obscurity through skill alone. But perhaps both are true. He began as a corsair, yet he ended as a statesman and admiral of an empire. The lesson of Barbarossa is not just about conquest, it is about transformation. He adapted to shifting alliances, changing politics, and new technologies. He understood that survival at sea required intelligence as much as courage, and that may have been his greatest victory. When he died in 1546, cannons fired in his honor.
His mausoleum still stands overlooking the Bosporus. Sailors once saluted his tomb before setting out to sea. They knew they were sailing in waters he had once ruled. But that is not the end of his story. The question lingers beyond his lifetime. Was Barbarossa a ruthless raider or a naval genius who reshaped history? The answer depends on where you stand and which side of the horizon you call home. The story of Hayreddin Barbarossa is not just about ships and battles. It is about how one man changed the destiny of an entire sea. He rose from a small island to command empires, proving that power does not always begin in palaces. Sometimes it begins with courage, ambition, and an unbreakable will. He lived in a world divided by faith, crowns, and conquest, yet he forced rival kingdoms to acknowledge his strength. The Mediterranean became a stage where his decisions shaped history for generations. But it also reminds us how thin the line can be between pirate and patriot. So how should we remember him? As a feared corsair who struck terror into coastal cities, or as a master strategist who secured his empire's dominance? Perhaps history is rarely that simple. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe to History Hub for more cinematic stories.